2 o'clock, they took him quietly. No shouting, no warrants, no explanations. The light was still on in the hallway, and folders with Reich seals lay on the desk in the office, the same ones as always. A few minutes later, Wilhelm Canaris was already being taken out of Berlin. No one said where. In the Third Reich, this meant only one thing: the game was over. This story is not about career, rank, or rise to power. It is a story about how one man at the head of Nazi intelligence fought Nazism for years, not with slogans, but with sabotage. Our hero was born in Germany at the end of the 19th century into a family with military traditions. From childhood, he grew up in an environment of discipline, hierarchy, and service to the state. A military career was not a choice for him, it was a continuation of the path that was expected of him. While still young, he joined the Navy. There, he quickly displayed traits that would later make him dangerous to the dictatorship: a cool head, the ability to remain silent, and the ability to think strategically and independently. He was not a fanatic, he was not a romantic, and he did not believe in loud slogans. He was not interested in ideology, but in reality. The First World War became a school of survival for him. He saw how easily the state throws people into the meat grinder and how quickly great ideas end in mass graves. It was then that he developed a deep aversion to senseless war, not as a fear, but as a sober conclusion. After Germany's defeat, he remained in the army. Not out of loyalty to the regime, but because he believed that chaos and revanchism were more dangerous than restrained force. He watched closely as radicalism gradually grew in the country, and did not share this enthusiasm. When he took control of the intelligence apparatus, he did not arrive with a manifesto or a purge list. He arrived with silence. The organization he inherited was already shaped by fear and ambition, a structure designed to serve power rather than truth. Many expected him to sharpen it into a more ruthless weapon. Instead, he changed its internal logic. Outwardly, nothing seemed different. Reports flowed upward, stamps were applied, chains of command remained intact. But inside the machine, priorities subtly shifted. Efficiency was replaced by caution. Speed gave way to verification. Operations that promised spectacular results were delayed, fragmented, or quietly buried under requests for clarification. He understood that in a totalitarian system, resistance did not need to look like opposition. It could look like procedure. He promoted people not for ideological enthusiasm but for temperament. Those who asked too many questions were dangerous, but those who asked the right ones were invaluable. He surrounded himself with professionals who believed in craft rather than doctrine. Men who understood codes, logistics, and human behavior, and who were skeptical of grand visions. In meetings, he rarely spoke at length. He listened. Silence made others careless, and carelessness revealed intent. He reframed intelligence work as risk management rather than conquest. Information was no longer a tool for expansion but a buffer against catastrophe. By redefining success internally, he made failure look like diligence. Missed opportunities were explained as prevented disasters. The language of reports became defensive, filled with conditional phrases and hypothetical dangers. This bureaucratic fog slowed the system just enough to matter. Most importantly, he disconnected intelligence from inevitability. The regime believed history was on its side, that events moved forward with mechanical certainty. He knew better. By introducing doubt, not publicly, but structurally, he weakened the myth of unstoppable momentum. The Abwehr began to hesitate, and hesitation, in a regime built on acceleration, was a form of sabotage. He understood early that he was not fighting for victory. He was fighting for delay. Time was the only currency that could not be fully controlled by the state, and he spent his career stealing it back piece by piece. Every postponed operation, every reassessed alliance, every contradictory report bought days, weeks, sometimes months. He knew that modern war was not decided solely by battles but by timing, by who acted too early, who acted too late, and who was forced to react. His task was to ensure that the regime always moved at the wrong moment. Internally, he cultivated a culture of anticipation rather than aggression. He encouraged his officers to think several steps ahead, not in terms of victory but in terms of consequences. What would happen after success? Who would pay the cost? What new enemies would be created? These questions did not stop the war, but they complicated it. Complexity slowed decision-making, and slowing decision-making was his quiet art. He also understood that time worked differently for people than for systems. Individuals grew tired, disillusioned, careless. Ideological fervor burned fast and left exhaustion behind. By stretching the duration of operations, he allowed enthusiasm to decay naturally. Orders that arrived late lost their emotional force. Missions delayed too long were executed without conviction. His war with time was also personal. He lived with the constant awareness that his position was temporary, that the system would eventually turn inward. He measured his own survival not in years but in usefulness. As long as he could still obstruct, misdirect, or soften the blow, his presence mattered. When he could no longer do so, time would be up. This awareness gave him a peculiar calm. He did not rush. Panic was the regime's greatest weakness, and he refused to share it. By moving slowly in a world obsessed with speed, he created friction. And friction, applied consistently, wears down even the largest machines. Despite the scale of the apparatus he led, he never lost sight of the smallest variable, the individual. Systems, he believed, were abstractions. People were real. And people, unlike ideologies, could still be influenced by conscience, fear, loyalty, or fatigue. He paid close attention to character. He remembered personal details others dismissed as irrelevant, a subordinate's hesitation, a sudden request for transfer, a pattern of excessive compliance. These were signals. Ideological commitment tended to be loud and predictable. Doubt was quiet and irregular. He listened for irregularities. He protected those who showed signs of inner resistance, not by openly endorsing them, but by placing them where they could do the least harm, or the most good. A reassignment here, a stalled promotion there. Careers were shaped in ways that appeared logical but served deeper purposes. Those who might have become instruments of repression were diverted into harmless routines. Those capable of discretion were placed near sensitive junctions. He also understood fear as a tool that cut both ways. The regime relied on terror to enforce obedience, but terror also produced paralysis. By maintaining an image of ambiguity around himself, neither openly loyal nor visibly hostile, he made it difficult for rivals to move against him decisively. Uncertainty bred caution. In private conversations, he never spoke of resistance. He spoke of responsibility. Of long-term consequences. Of what it meant to live after the slogans faded. He did not ask people to oppose the state, he asked them to think beyond it. This distinction mattered. It allowed individuals to see themselves not as traitors, but as professionals preserving a future. The human factor was also his vulnerability. He felt the weight of every compromised decision, every life indirectly affected by his choices. He did not romanticize this burden. He accepted it as the cost of acting within a corrupted structure. Saving everyone was impossible. Saving some, quietly, without recognition, was the limit of the achievable. He never framed his actions as rescue missions. Salvation, when it occurred, was incidental, a byproduct of obstruction, delay, and misdirection. He believed that overt humanitarian gestures were dangerous, not only to himself but to those he sought to help. Visibility was lethal. Instead, he created spaces where harm failed to occur. An arrest order lost in administrative limbo. A transfer delayed until circumstances changed. A warning delivered indirectly, stripped of drama. These acts left no signature. They were designed to look like accidents, inefficiencies, or simple bad luck. He understood that the regime excelled at spectacle. It needed visible enemies and dramatic victories. By denying it both, by ensuring that some operations simply dissolved into nothing, he deprived it of momentum. The absence of an event was harder to trace than an act of defiance. Those who benefited from these gaps often never knew his role. And that was intentional. Gratitude created connections, and connections created trails. He preferred anonymity, even in success. To be thanked was to be exposed. Over time, rumors circulated. Some saw him as unreliable. Others suspected him of weakness. A few sensed something more deliberate but lacked proof. This ambiguity protected him. In a system obsessed with certainty, ambiguity was camouflage. Salvation, when viewed from the outside, appeared inconsistent. Some were saved, others were not. This randomness was not cruelty, it was strategy. Predictable mercy would have revealed intent. Unpredictable outcomes preserved the illusion of chaos. He never claimed moral superiority. He knew that operating within the system implicated him in its crimes. His goal was not purity but reduction, reducing suffering, reducing speed, reducing certainty. If history ever noticed him, he wanted it to see not a hero, but a friction point. The most dangerous aspect of his position was proximity. He worked alongside institutions built explicitly for repression, staffed by people who thrived on suspicion. To survive, he had to engage in a delicate game, one that required neither confrontation nor submission. He treated his counterparts with formal respect, never warmth. Professional courtesy without intimacy. He shared information selectively, always enough to appear cooperative, never enough to be useful. When pressed, he cited jurisdictional boundaries, procedural requirements, or incomplete verification. Bureaucracy became his shield. He also allowed small victories. Now and then, an investigation succeeded. A suspect was handed over. These concessions were calculated. Total obstruction would have provoked scrutiny. Limited cooperation reinforced trust, or at least reduced suspicion. He understood that predators were less alert when fed occasionally. Behind the scenes, he cultivated rivalries he did not create but knew how to exploit. Different branches competed for influence, resources, and recognition. By subtly reinforcing these tensions, he ensured that attention was divided. A fragmented surveillance state is less efficient than a unified one. He never underestimated them. He knew they were intelligent, patient, and ruthless. He assumed he was always being watched. This assumption guided his behavior. He avoided patterns. He changed routines. He kept his personal life deliberately unremarkable. The game was asymmetrical. They needed certainty to act. He needed only doubt to survive. As long as doubt existed, about his intentions, his loyalties, his usefulness, action was delayed. And delay, once again, was victory. Eventually, the cumulative effect of obstruction made itself felt. Plans failed more often. Allies hesitated. Trust eroded. The system, built on the assumption of perfect coordination, began to experience internal resistance not as ideology but as inefficiency. Mistakes multiplied. Not dramatic failures, but small ones, the kind that compound. A missed signal. A delayed response. A misjudged reaction. Each alone was explainable. Together, they formed a pattern. The machine still moved, but it groaned. He sensed the shift before others did. The tolerance for ambiguity narrowed. The regime, under pressure, demanded clarity. Loyalty had to be visible. Neutrality became suspicious. The space he had occupied for so long began to collapse. Colleagues disappeared. Conversations shortened. Procedures were streamlined, the very opposite of what he had cultivated. Speed returned, and with it, recklessness. The system sought to cure its pain by accelerating, unaware that acceleration would only worsen the damage. He prepared for the end without dramatics. He did not attempt escape. He did not issue final instructions. His work was already done, insofar as it could be. Anything more would have been symbolic, and symbolism belonged to the regime, not to him. When they came, it was as he had expected, quietly, efficiently, without explanation. The absence of noise confirmed everything he had believed. In such systems, truth is never announced. It is implied. He had always known how it would end. Not in triumph, not in public reckoning, but in silence. His struggle was never meant to be seen. It was meant to exist in the negative space of history, in events that did not happen, in lives that continued without knowing why. He did not expect gratitude. He did not expect rehabilitation. He expected erasure. And he accepted it. For someone who had spent a lifetime working in shadows, disappearance was not a defeat but a conclusion. If there was any consolation, it lay in the knowledge that systems like the one he served and sabotaged are brittle. They appear strong because they demand uniformity, but uniformity hides fragility. By introducing doubt, delay, and humanity, he had exposed that fragility from within. His story, if told at all, would be uncomfortable. It would resist simple categories of hero and villain. It would force questions about complicity, responsibility, and the limits of resistance. Perhaps that is why it would take so long to be told. In the end, he did not overthrow the system. He outlasted parts of it. And in doing so, he proved a quiet truth: even in the heart of a dictatorship, control is never absolute, and resistance does not always shout.